Welcome to SJS Arts. So today I have as a guest Altaz from Cine Art Therapy once again, and we are doing a different type of podcast this time, as we came up with this idea called SJS Recommends. So in each episode, I'm gonna recommend Altaz a couple of films that are my personal favorites, and then we will talk about those films and see what Altez thinks about them. And I'm also gonna, of course, offer my thoughts, even though many of these films I've gonna talk to death on my channel already. But I think there will always be a different dynamic as we are talking about them together, and there will be different points. But I will probably make some of the same points that I have made in previous videos as well. But hopefully, you guys don't mind that. But anyway, in this episode, we have two films by two of my favorite directors. So first we are going to talk about Fox and His Friends by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, one of my top 10 films of all time. I just watched it again yesterday for the third time. And then after that, we are going to talk about Aki Kaurismäki's The Other Side of Hope, one of his more recent films. It's from 2017, and he said that after that film that he was going to retire, but of course last year he came up with another film, and I'm really excited to hear what Altez thinks about these films. But before that, you can introduce yourself as always. Yeah.
Oh yeah, my name is obviously it's Altaz, which you said, and I have a channel, Cine Art Therapy. It hasn't been that active recently because I've been in the midst of a move and starting a new job. But the whole channel was very much inspired by the work you do on your channel, SJS, and to dialogue about like cinema appreciation. And I've always found that to be healing, and that was the message on your channel too. That kind of appreciating different cinema, thinking about it, discussing it, can be really healing for the individual. It can promote growth. So that's sort of always the mission, so to speak. And on top of that, I'm very excited to do this because I absolutely love this idea of someone recommending and then you watching and then discussing after uh, thoughts on the film. So I think this is an exciting series, and it'll keep me on my cinema game as well, because I know you'll always suggest great stuff.
And I guess both of these films kind of tackle the issue of empathy in different ways.
Hmm.
So it's kind of relevant for our channel's missions, I guess, in that way. And of course, to everybody, before we start, there will be lots of spoilers. So if you haven't seen these films, it's probably better to not watch this chat before you watch the films. Although I know some people don't mind spoilers, but yeah, at least if I were to watch Fox and His Friends for the first time, for example, I wouldn't want to be spoiled, as it has a pretty interesting ending
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But anyway, we are gonna start with Fassbinder's Fox and His Friends now, one of his, I guess you could say, mid-period films, because he had very short career of like 15 years, but he started in the late 60s, and this is from the mid-70s, and then he died in the early 80s. But yeah, this is actually my favorite Fassbinder film, and like I said, it's actually in my top 10 of all time, and after my third watch, it's still there. I just relate to the film in many ways, and we will get into that later. But now, first of all, I want to hear what did you think of the film. We can start with some like very general comments, and then slowly get more into the themes and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe you want to show because I see all you have
Oh
your
yeah,
Fassbender stuff back there, and there it is. And then I can also share on that one because I basically got it here as well. There we go. Fox and His Friends, and then of course I double dipped,
yeah,
which is very interesting. I think the cover. We could also actually discuss how they decided to do the cover for the Criterion, because it says something about the film, I think, after seeing it. But yeah, let's. What did I think? Um, wow, it's like well, what I appreciated about both the films also is I found Fox and His Friends to be quite humorous. Uh, because while it's tackling difficult subject matter, I just couldn't help like laugh or chuck, or at least in turn I was like, okay, this is very funny. He's being funny. He's being facetious in some ways, in how he's setting up kind of the plot and the events and even his own the character of well, which we can show you have it back there, Franz Bieberkopf. So for those who haven't read this yet, Franz Bieberkopf is a character in Berlin Alexanderplatz. He's the main character, and this is apparently Fox Rainer Werner Fassbender's was an important book for him. I think he mentioned it saved his life many times. So I don't think it's surprise he named the main character after it, because it's very much in some ways parallels the book in the sense that there's this subculture. But yeah, I find it like I think I'm struggling a bit exactly how to kind of start a discussion about the film. I enjoyed it very much, so let's start there. I enjoyed it very much. I don't know where to rank it in terms of Fassbender's work, because I haven't watched enough of his work, to be honest. I've barely watched any of it. I think I've seen the first part of World on a Wire. I've seen Love is Colder Than Death, his first film. I've seen, I think you pronounce it Katzelmacher, or most of that. And so, but I think it's a really great film, and there's so much to be discussed there, and I'm very much curious actually to hear your thoughts, because it's very much will add to my experience to see, like, what you were observing about the film as it's your favorite film or one of your favorite films.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the humorous side of the film, because I think the tone of the film is very interesting, how it's very bleak and dark at many moments of the film. It's about cruelty, for example, and many other things that we'll get into. But I also find the film really funny. And one of my favorite scenes is towards the end when Franz and Eugen are having the dinner with Eugen's parents.
Oh yeah.
And then Franz makes a complete fool of himself when he takes the matchstick box of his pocket and then does the thing with Eugen's mother, and that scene is just so hilarious, and it's funny how that's a good scene where they're gonna show also the class differences and things already, and again the mother talks about how she hates Stravinsky's Firebird, and kind of funny coincidence is that I actually listened to Stravinsky's Firebird last week, and I didn't remember that it was mentioned in this film, but kind of funny coincidence. But that's one of the funny scenes, and I think while many of the scenes where we see these kind of class disparities and the class consciousness and things like this, many of those scenes are very funny and actually kind of relatable for me, because I think there is a bit of Franz in me and also a bit of Eugen in me in a way, because I'm from a working class background. I'm like very much relatively poor. Again, not globally poor, but in Finland, very much poor. And I'm from a kind of a meat and potatoes type of family, so I can relate to that part in France. But then at the same time, I obviously love high art, and I've discovered things like that. And I think I know kind of how to behave and that etiquette way better than France. I wouldn't make a fool out of myself like that, but I can also relate to both of that working class thing, but also a bit of that snobbiness that why don't these people listen to classical music and why don't they like about art, and yeah, but I wouldn't be such an asshole about it like Eugen is.
Yeah, I mean, you're mentioning such so many interesting things. So it's like the whole character of Fox, or Franz Bieberkopf. He's like, it's interesting to see his journey, right? Because he starts with this sense of great confidence in himself, and we could say it's maybe ignorance is bliss. it's also kind of all these almost superstitious beliefs in some ways too, where it's like the dumb luck, the lottery, oh, I know I'm gonna win, that, that kind of thing. And to see his journey enter into this world, which he feels, yes, if I have money, I will now get to enter this world, and that's about all there is. So, I guess this Arrow release has a great commentary, which I was also listening to. So, I guess that has a little bit to do with um, maybe Fassbender trying to lampoon capitalism a bit. It's like you think it's just money that opens the doors, but then when you open the door, and I guess that kind of European um, capitalism that's also mixed in with a lot of cultural capital, which we've discussed in our snobbery discussions as well. That money's going to open this door, and then that's sort of all there is. And him feeling almost lost in that system, almost Kafkaesque in a sense, right? He like enters that world and he doesn't has trouble making head or tails of it. He doesn't quite know what he's supposed to do. So that dinner scene's a perfect example because that's him feeling like confidence in I have charm, I have humor, I can relate to people, and he's trying to relate with the mother, and the mother just sees him as this almost grotesque, like brutish type individual, uh, and I think that is a big turning point, isn't it? Like after that dinner, there's a major shift as well. There's an arc, there's a change even in him because he's now experienced, I think, humiliation after humiliation in his journey, and he himself is now starting to really question himself.
Yeah. And there is another kind of dinner type of scene earlier in the film when Eugen and
Hmm.
Franz are in a restaurant, and then Franz starts to do the things with his hands in the table, and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, that's really funny. But there's like very interesting conversation about class here because there's, like you said, there's the cultural capital and then there's the actual capital because Franz is the one that has the money, but Eugen doesn't have the money, and his business with his father is struggling, and then they again get money from France. But he
So
kind of has
interesting.
this cultural capital in the way that he knows classical music, he knows antique furniture, and he knows art, and he knows how to dress well, he knows the etiquette. But then at the same time, he doesn't have the money, and also he doesn't have like kind of moral or ethical principles. So he's just proud of these kind of very superficial things of his taste in art, but then he's a very cruel and awful person that should really take a look at the mirror and see that what a awful person he is. He's an
Yeah,
exploiter. Yeah,
yeah. And as you're talking, I'm like seeing all these things that obviously we've discussed our like respective videos on snobbery, but also in the chat we had about snobbery, and you kind of see there, and it. I also thought of this question. I mean, does Fassbender think those things are valuable, given how this film proceeds and its events, and how he's showing the different worlds? Is he, and at that time, film being seen, and especially his approach to film, I think he believes he has a very, or he had that a very kind of democratic approach to film, very popular approach to film in a sense, because he liked, for example, like Douglas Sirk in American films. He said he was like a film addict, like self-professed film addict. So, what do you think? Do you think when he's showing that world, he's showing there's a value to this kind of historic cultural capital that basically keeps certain individuals with power and control and influence, even though from a capitalist standpoint they're actually failures, because now at this point they don't have any money. So according to strict capitalism, they should just fail and go to the bottom of the rung, and it really should be Fox's world, not their world. What do you think about that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he looks at Franz Biberkopf from a very empathetic lens, but he kind of looks at the snobbish people from a more critical lens and shows how, again, they aren't good people, even though they have this taste in art. So I think he is more in the side of the ignorant working class, you could say. And you can see that throughout his career as well, that he looks at these Franz Biberkopf type of characters with empathy in other films too. Yeah, but that's a very good question. Yeah.
Yeah, that it is one to really think about as you watch this film. Also, given that he himself is, I think he comes from like a middle class background himself, and so there are such he leaves that ambiguity. As you said, he does. There's that empathy. You're right. I feel like, yeah, I can see that. It's his approach is empathy. So he's showing some empathetic lens even on Eugen, because Eugen is like, at some points he is trying to what groom, as we use the term now, uh, Fox. He is trying to impart that knowledge. He is trying to say, you must. There's one point where he says, "You must learn. You must learn. You will get there." Like, he's disheartened, right? Like, Fox is like, "Oh, why should I bother with this?" And he's like, "You must learn. You must learn." So in some ways, while they are selfish people, they have their selfish interests. They're even using, but they're doing it in almost a naive way. They're not really thinking of themselves as evil at all. It's kind of like, these are the rules of the game. And it's not exactly that Fox does not have access to the rules of the game, because Eugen is giving it to them. But then Fox is kind of resistant. He has his ideas. He does want to stay in this world. So there is this kind of naiveness about Fox, and same thing in Berlin Alexanderplatz. That's why I feel like it really mirrors that book, because Franz Biberkopf, in that same way, is naive. He's not quite learning his lessons. He's not quite able to see people's ulterior motives. Yet they fancy themselves to be very clever. So Fox does show this like confidence of, I know what's going on, yet he doesn't fully know what's going on. And then he has an opportunity to learn. He's not quite taking it. And then Eugen, at the same time, is kind of interesting that he's telling him, "You must learn, you must learn." As the commentary says, uh, when he himself never had to learn, he was basically handed that out of the crib. So out of the womb, he was already handed this knowledge. He never had to learn. He was basically straight away socialized into it. Um, yeah, I don't know what your
Yeah.
thoughts are on some of those
Yeah,
things.
that's good point again about how he has been like that kind of from the since he was born, because obviously his parents are the same way. So kind of even blame Eugen for being like that way when it's clearly coming from his mother, who can we see in the dinner table that she is that type of intellectual as well, who doesn't really have the highest opinion of people beneath her, you could say, the working class. And the father is quite the character. When we see him in the factory, he's always drunk, and yeah, that doesn't really seem like a good father. Yeah. So maybe you can actually have lots of childhood trauma that kind of made him a sociopath. And
Yeah, and
one
I
thing,
think that's. Oh, sorry. Please continue. Yeah.
yeah, I was well. You can say first, because I'm gonna do another big point that's kind of something else. So
Oh no,
maybe
I was just gonna say, there's all this humor, right? There's all this lampooning. Like, supposedly, when you mentioned him being drunk, there's this idea that these capitalists at the top, it's because they're like the hardest workers in the room, and in this sense, they always show Ergen like not doing anything, obviously, not even learning his dad's business. the father, like you said, drunk and just worried about his debts, and it's really Fox who's eventually the one who's like the hardest worker in the room. He's actually physically trying to do something for the factory. So I was just gonna say, yeah, there's all these jokes that come up when as you're mentioning, because you can see all the different scenes, and it's really really funny actually.
Yeah, the Eugen is a kind of character that he wants everything, but he doesn't want to do any work for it. So, like that one of the funny scenes is also when they are buying the apartment and he's just going around. I want this, yeah, Baroque bed here, and yeah, these 18th century tables here, and then they also go to the antique shop that's again run by one of the kind of major side characters. I think was his name Max or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a funny scene. Yeah, put those tigers in as well. Yeah, yeah, those are really funny scenes because obviously we always talk about snobbery, and we find this type of snobbery, even though we are critical of it, very funny at the same time, and those scenes really give me a smirk. Yeah, but the one of the other points that I was gonna make is obviously these characters are gay, but they are exploiters, so we can see how kind of exploited people can become exploiters themselves. So whether you are from a kind of group that is exploited or has a bad standing in the society, is discriminated, you can still become exploiter yourself, like Eugen is, and many of his friends are as well. But this film at the same time isn't that much about the characters being gay, but there's definitely some of that discussion in the film too, and there's also this kind of a discussion on how surface level gay relationships often are, how men often go from relationship to relationship, and it's all about sex, and it's not about love, it's not about anything that's kind of permanent, it's always these kind of temporary things, and that's a very kind of, you could say, big problem in the gay community, obviously depending on everyone's perspective or relationships and stuff. But I definitely, as someone who believes in true love and things, I think these are big problems here. But that's kind of a minor thing in the film. I think the film is more about class in general, not necessarily about gay people, but there's a bit of that too. And there's even a bit of discussion about kind of racism when they go to Marrakesh in Morocco, and we see kind of how the character, like the Moroccan character, that they try to get into the hotel, but then they say that you cannot come to the hotel, but then they ask the hotel person, but you are a Moroccan too, so why can't you come here? Absolute insanity, like yeah. And it's actually funny because
we don't want Arabs in the hotel.
Yeah. It's actually kind of, I watched this queer documentary on New Year's Eve about kind of Finnish queer culture, and they actually talked about there for a brief period of time how Morocco was actually real life too, like a place for gay people to go. I didn't know that, but apparently it used to be like that, but I don't think it's like that anymore. But that's very interesting. I would love to learn more about that at some point. But the Morocco scenes are quite interesting, and Eugen gets to speak French because he's so proud that he can speak French, and obviously France buys that dictionary as well, but he never learns French. Yeah.
My God, there's so many things as you're discussing that each and everything can be like discussed in depth, because when you, even the last thing you just said, he bought the dictionary, but he never learned. And so we are in a system where you judge that person, right? You have the dictionary. Why can't you learn? That's more that pulling yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. And I think one thing it seems to show is that empathy, that yes, but it's very difficult. I mean, you could just spend your whole lifetime trying to learn, and maybe we can think about it, even the whole arc, in a very Sisyphusian way, right? That it's like he's continually supposed to learn, and he's trying to learn, and he's all this, and at the end of the, you spend your whole life trying to learn, and at the end, what do you actually gain, or do you gain? Because again, you're back to this very exploitative system, at least in his world, the way he's seeing it. It's very cynical, and I think it's also the part that was very controversial too, right? In some sense, because if you're showing a marginalized group, but then you're showing this kind of very selfish human nature type of thing, exploitative relationships, you might be doing a disservice to the group as a whole. But I very much am in line with what you're saying, which is that he did it as an experiment. He just said, look, I'm going to take this subculture that some know about, but majority of you don't know about, and I'm going to show you how these relationships play out, and they play out in the same way. Like when you're talking about this kind of objectification in these gay relationships, the way I saw it was, well, it's just showing that it's the same but different, right? Because in the what you would say majority culture or the hetero culture, there's that objectification going on. It's just for different uh, fetishes. So here it's for phalluses, and right, and there in the hetero world, it's for other aspects of the female body, but yet each place it's mirroring each other. It's the same form of exploitation. Someone's on top, someone's being subjugated, someone is being exploited, uh, someone is being confined to certain roles and expectations. So but I think you could speak more to that than I can.
Yeah, and again, the fact that these people are exploiters, again, the film doesn't make a point that they are that because they are gay, but it kind of shows that it's because of class, no matter whether you are gay or not. And of course, there are many gay characters here that are, you could say, good people, like the people in the kind of the bar, the kind of lower ranked bar that Eugen hates, but that is kind of France's like safe haven, where we have all those characters, his old friends like Klaus, and then the guy who runs the flower show was quite funny.
Yeah, he was very funny.
Polizei, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
polizei.
yeah. But yeah, we see there more the
But
class
that's also
distinction.
funny too, right? Someone who's gay expecting the police is going to come and protect him, and like he really believes that he's got equal access to the same thing. I'm not, maybe I'm overreading it, but even that little thing seems a bit funny, right? That he's depending so much on the police, who obviously don't they treat the members of that community differently, right? So they wouldn't necessarily jump to help them, and they would maybe avoid them. And I don't know what the laws were at that time. Maybe even perhaps arrest them. So I don't know.
Yeah, he kind of clings on to these heteronormative views, kind of not necessarily consciously, but it feels almost unconscious that he just kind of has this automatic response, Polizei. He doesn't really do it consciously, but anyway, it's kind of funny.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's like you hit it right there. It's this programming aspect. You're programmed. You don't know when you got programmed to believe certain things, but you were, and then you hold on to it irrespective of what's going on around you. And I think that's also mirrored a little bit in Fox's journey too, right? Irrespective of what's actually happening, he's still holding on to this idea for a very long time, because he's been, I don't know how did he receive that idea, but once he did, it's that regardless of what's going on around him, he's not revising his view. He still thinks, we must hold on to this business no matter what. And it's like a failing business, which is a very interesting thing, right? He's not able to see, maybe there's a problem in this industry, maybe it's a failing business, maybe, right? He just, the idea, this is a this is a long standing business, it has this reputation, so it doesn't matter that the emperor has no clothes. It's very important to hold on to that institute and be a part of it. So I think that seems to be an interesting commentary going on there as well. There's some subtext there, perhaps.
Well, I started to think about one of the funny scenes when they're like ordering the French food in the restaurant, and Franz has no idea what the foods are, and he's just and Eugen is just ordering him these gourmet foods that Franz gonna he just wants noodle soup and sausages, and he
Yeah,
wants
and he was
beer and
like,
not these expensive wines and stuff.
yeah, and even that was funny because he was like, "I'll have a beer," right? And Eugen is very disappointed, but even then, he doesn't say, "Oh, bring him a beer." He's like, "Bring him a pilsner."
Yeah.
So even there, it's like there's this appropriateness. Don't just call it a beer; it's a pilsner. Maybe, I don't know. That's how it was in the translation, because he clearly in the translation it's like he's saying beer. I want a beer, and then he orders him a pilsner, which is a beer, but it's more appropriate. It's almost like he was still trying to make even a beer sound a little bit higher class than
Yeah. And,
so he's not so embarrassed by
and there's
someone drinking a beer with him.
and there's another interesting part of that scene is when they talk about the box that Franz had collected the box in a box, but he
Yeah.
had heard from a friend that you could actually get money from the box if you took them to the city council or something, and then
Oh, yeah.
Eugen says that everybody knew that, but that kind of shows how some of these people try to get capital from like every single thing that they do in their lives, but Franz is so naive that money doesn't even play a part in his life in that way, but these other people kind of make everything in life about money, even like bugs as a kid and things like that. That was just kind of point that came to me now. I
No,
hadn't
that's a
thought of
very
it when
important
I,
point.
yeah.
That's actually a very important point. I mean, now that you mention, I'm like, yeah, that's right, because there's that whole outburst he has too, right? I help everybody. I'm supposed to help everybody. It's like, even it's we can understand that it's a much more communal mentality. When you have money, then you're supposed to kind of help. It's like he's almost not bred to be selfish. So it's like, even when you have the money, to keep the money, you have to have a whole different way of operating, where he's very much like, I'm buying this round of drinks. Oh, what do you want? And it's like, even his ex comes out of prison, and it's like, oh, here's a loan. And so he's not really doing the math. He's trying to kind of help everyone. And again, that's very Franz Bieberkopf from Berlin Alexanderplatz as well. Like, he's not that, I guess you could say, not that clever, um, you know, um, which would be like kind of passing a judgment on him. But it's like, I think that element is there, that he is not that clever. And he's in, even the father's name, it's Wolf, right? I believe the father's name, Eugen's father's name is Wolf. So there it is. There's a wolf, like right there, and it's like Fox is like a sheep. Like, these are wolves, and he's like a sheep. Like, he's not. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, so many things, so many things. I mean, the whole Morocco trip you mentioned too is such an interesting episode in the film as well.
Yeah, Franz is actually in many ways kind of more admirable character, even though with his stupidity and naivety, at least he tries to be open and learn and be open to the classical music and things like that. But when you look at Eugen and his friends, how kind of rigid they are about everything, that they are just stuck in their ways and they never evolve, they never learn. Like, they kind of talk about Stravinsky that, oh, this new modern music, it's garbage. Yeah,
Yeah,
give
right.
me Mozart any day of the week, even though Stravinsky was a genius. I mean, listen to Rite of Spring. It's better than most classical pieces ever, but they have this kind of rigid idea how the world should be, and they always cling to the past and their past ways and their past status, and they cannot move on. So actually, Franz is in many ways, he could be a better intellectual, as he has an open mind and he's willing to at least try out new things, unlike these people who are kind of more educated and stuff. because of course we have always talked about how important it is to have an open mind and to be willing to learn, and you aren't like a real art lover if you only have this kind of rigid set of ideas that yeah, it needs to be something baroque, it needs to be classical music, but the
Mm.
actual intellectual can say that yeah, I love Madonna, but I also love like Stravinsky or Schubert or
Mm.
whatever.
Mm. Mm.
You can read both a Star Wars novel and Mishima and Chekhov.
Mm.
Yeah, you can watch Roadhouse, but you can also watch Bergman's Persona. Like that's the intellectual stuff, and not having these very rigid old school ideas what art should be.
You're absolutely right. And also the film itself. I mean, Fox and his friends. If you look at it, the film objectively, there's nothing, that's the one thing I noted is okay, like this recommendation from SJS, it's a highly accessible film. Its themes are not hidden. It's not one of those where it's like you're trying to peer and figure out what the themes are. And it's very interesting that it's seen as part of this art house cinema now, right? When it's such an accessible film, it's no different, and it's very interesting. But yes, Fassbender, it's like he was inspired by Douglas Sirk. It's no different than Douglas Sirk films. To be honest, it's the same thing. It has very similar themes to All That Heaven Allows in a way. The clashing of worlds, the clashing of classes, even ideas. Um, a world that, for example, like Rock Hudson, like his character, like he doesn't feel comfortable being part of. There's a question of whether Carrie's. So you see that, so you're like, okay, how is this kind of impenetrable cinema? And so by even recommend this and discussing this, I hope, I mean, obviously we're talking about the film, so anyone who hasn't seen it maybe is not at this point of the discussion, but the hope is really that people do, who haven't seen it, watch it, because it's super accessible. The themes, it's not, even the character of Fox is someone, you like you said, we can all relate to. um, and obviously it's like a tragic comedy, you would say, because it's like a tragedy, but it's also a comedy um, that has a lot of heart. And then there are also interesting things that you mentioned as well, that within this, in some ways, class intolerant group, they're they're very tolerant of their son being gay. They don't see it any different than if he was hetero. So in some ways, they're very tolerant too. That one, they don't question sexuality at all. Um, so which is an interesting thing, which maybe he's commenting on, well, old aristocracy, they were always well aware of homosexuality, and it was there, but maybe it was just hidden. But they don't have a problem with the existence of that. But I don't know what your thoughts are about that, their whole tolerance of homosexuality, or do you think he's just illustrated that as a for effect, or in this world that he's created?
Yeah, very very interesting question. Like I said earlier, I think again the film isn't trying to make a huge point about the gayness, but more about the class. But of course, that's true that I guess upper class and bourgeoisie have been more tolerant about gay people back in the 70s, but also historically, and probably still to this day. But I'm not sure whether it's trying to make a huge point about that.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
Yeah, so those parts are very interesting. Even Hugin's makeup, like the way they have, he puts eyeliner, like very obviously, like in a way that it's very noticeable, which is also very interesting, because then they go to Morocco, where in the Arab world sometimes you do use that, it's actually cultural to actually use that, or the men using it, but you associate that with more like terrorism, like these terrorists use it because they're like extremists. So it's like there's a lot of like um, interesting things. There's even things that are happening political in that moment, right? The whole oil embargo. So all of a sudden, when he's trying to sell the sports car, it's like no one wants this car anymore. Gas is so expensive. and that's because of the whole OPEC crisis. So there's always very 70s things also in there. So it's interesting to watch in terms of world events too. You think about what's going on in this country, which is West Germany, and some, just 30 years after uh,
World War II.
the Second World War, right? Something like that, 25, something like years after. And so it's still they're very close to those in some ways. And so where's the country at that point?
And I also gonna comment more on the kind of gay stuff in here, because obviously there, even though I said that it doesn't make the biggest point about that, but there's lots of queer imagery here, and if you know the kind of queer aesthetic, you definitely don't know that it's made by a gay guy, because there are obviously lots of male frontal nudity, and how they put the bodies in the
Oh
shots
man.
and stuff, and some of the color as well, and the mud pads and things like that. Yeah, it's so queer in that way. But
And they're like those Romanesque statues. Like my favorite is when they're in that mud bath, they get out of the mud bath, and like Max is talking to him, and then there's this almost like young, like teenagers, like in those Romanesque that he's just standing there, right, naked, and all you see is this phallus in the background, and you're like, it's so awkward, right? He's talking, and then it's like right here. So as the audience, you can't help but like it's really hard to listen to even what he's saying. And I think he is definitely. I felt he's doing something there. He is, there's some humor there. Why would you position it in this way? Like these two are talking, these guys are walking around back. Like you could imagine some Roman senators like
yeah,
sitting there, and then there are these beautiful boys like just walking around in the background. Like I'm like, this is very, very, very interesting.
and even in Morocco, when like the guy who works at the hotel says, we can bring you some boys from the staff, and so that kind of calls back to perhaps earlier times in history as well, when things like that were done. Yeah, when the people were just like property. Yeah,
Yeah, that's also interesting. People as property. Yeah, because there's that element, isn't there? Especially on the trip to Morocco. It's like you have this wealth, and then yeah, it's like there's sex tourism. They're there, let's have some fun. Let's find some Arab men like that. So there is this whole. You're right. I think it's very interesting because yeah, it's interestingly within this what we would say gay community culture or world, but really it's about class, it's about exploitation, it's about human relationships. It's about trying to break barriers. It's an outsider trying to fit in. Um, yeah, wow, yeah. There's so much to this film, but yet, it's such an entertaining film. It's such an accessible film. It's an enjoyable film. It's one you want to watch again. You could watch again just because this character is so interesting. Fox, and so are his friends. And what I found, what I heard in that commentary is also that this is the English name Fox and his friends, but in German apparently it's something like might makes right and something like that. So it's a very different. If you think about the film, sort of changes based on what title you think it has. Here we think it's Fox and his friends is very story about this world that him and his friends and the kind of events that surround them and their relationships. Whereas in the German, if it's more like might makes right, you're right. It's much more about class and power dynamics in a society or in that particular society.
yeah, and it shows how again how capitalism kind of reduces everything to the superficial, reduces everything to money and objects and kind of stuff, but a real human virtue doesn't have any value in a world like this. Again, being kind, naive, friendly, it's all irrelevant in a world like this. It's all about how you can exploit people, how you can take advantage over other people, and how you can have this kind of superficial status over other people, but There's no like actual human virtue involved there, even though in an ideal society, obviously that would be the main thing.
Yeah, and there's this interesting thing, like I just thought of as you were saying that when he goes and gets that ticket and that lady is about to close up and she does the favor and gets him the ticket. And then he's like, I'm gonna come back with these flowers, but we never see a scene where he comes back and gives her any flowers.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that might be overreading it, but I think that's sort of interesting. We never see him come back to say, "Oh, like thank you for that." He just he took that kindness. Now that he has the money, he has no need to kind of go there and thank her. So maybe that's intentional, or maybe just that's just the way you just move the plot along. We just assume he went and did that. But I just thought of that as you were talking about that, um, about the whole system critique.
But France is in many ways a big kind of idealist as well. Like we can see in that he has those kind of big gestures in mind. Yeah, I'm gonna bring you these flowers and stuff. And then of course later on as well, when he kind of has this idea that yeah, Eugen really loves me. Like when he tries to kind of convince his old friends that yeah, we have a great relationship. It's all like brilliant love, and we are just so in love with each other, and it's all great. Even though obviously it isn't, but he has these big ideals in mind about his relationship and about everything. But then everything comes crashing down.
So now that's interesting based on what you were saying before, because you were talking about yourself as a self-professed romantic.
Yeah.
And in that sense, this is well, I don't know. I don't know if Fassbender is exactly saying one thing or another. I think very cleverly he's put all these elements here for to kind of explore, but not really uh, given a clear opinion on. So he is a romantic fox because his idealizing, right, and in even maybe I don't know, even seeing that scene where with the mud bath and these boys are walking around and with statuesque bodies and what it's that's very romantic as well, right? It's like that, like you said, like Roman Greek, like there's the reality, which is the power, the politics, the exploitation, the system, and then there's the romance, the art, right? Because these boys, in a way, or men, they are very much like representing some kind of aesthetic ideal or some romantic aesthetic ideal, also surrounding. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, the film is really kind of a film about different dichotomies. It's the two different classes. It's the art and the capital, and you can see kind of two sides of everything. And also, I was gonna make another point about France is that I've read some reviews on this film, and many people kind of complain that he's too much of he's too naive, he's too stupid, and he's too much of an idealist. But I've actually met lots of people like France in my real life. I know people like this exist that always think of people as something good, even though they have awful experiences. And I feel like I have been a bit like that. I'm not that anymore, but I used to be. But yeah, I've met many people like this, so I don't think it's kind of in any way unrealistic to have people as naive as this, because they do really exist.
No, and I relate to that. Me too. I mean, I wouldn't say I've never had any of the naivete that Fox had. I've pretty much had all his naivetes. The way he was looking at relationships, even friendships in the world he belongs to. So I think, yeah, when you said, oh, you can relate to the character, but also connecting to the discussions we've had about art and snobbery and all that stuff, it's very much reflected in the plot of this film, right? Our own personal journeys, because in some ways, this is different because it's to make it more immediate, it's the money, not the education. So, I mean, you we'll get into the other side of hope. So you paired it with the other side of hope, but it could very much be paired with Ariel as well. This film, I could very much see this film as an interesting double bill with like Padre Padron, because that's different. It's not through money, but it's through education that a barrier is crossed, and what that means. Um, so the yeah, it's like I can see exactly what you're saying about his naivete, and I think when you watch it, you do get frustrated with his naivete, but I always feel like that's self-reflexive. Like it's like you when you see it outside of you, it annoys you because it reminds you of you, because you too have seen the world in that way, and then you've been slapped in the same way. So in some ways, you want the character to be more aware than you would be in that situation and say, "Oh, you should know better." But it's like, no, you know better because you know where there's going, but you have the benefit of objectivity. But when you're involved, it's subjective, and you're going to see the same things. You're not going to sit there and say this person doesn't love me or doesn't care about me. That's exactly what happens. Like otherwise, we wouldn't have relationships breaking up. You would see it all along that, oh well, Ergen at the end of the day is not a good partner for you, or he's somewhat still using you. And when the money runs out, who are you going to be to him? So we can see that we're objective, but when you're in there, how do you see that?
Yeah, that reminded me of one quote that I was gonna also mention earlier. It like Eugen says to Franz something like, "We are gonna make you a human being yet," or something like this. That
Yes.
it's such a horrible thing to say, that you aren't even a human being because you don't like Mozart or whatever. You don't have these table manners, so you aren't even a human being. But we will make you a human being.
Yeah, and it's very like Cervantes, very like Don Quixote as well in those kinds of things, because he is seen as a brute, and then there's the association, right, of like the brute, the lower class, being more in a way uh, uh, sexually interesting, right? Because they're powered by lust, not intellect. So they have raw sexual power. This is the thing. So it's like he enters the upper class, and then it's like we go to Morocco, and then it's like, oh, let's go get these Arab men who are going to be much more interesting, like sexually, because right, because there is that, and it's in Don Quixote as well, in the way um, that's like even in that book, it's like all these interesting things about class. At least there was a lecture I was watching, and I was like, okay, that's really interesting, where they would look at these women, these uh, who are kind of sitting there, and milkmaids and whatnot, as being really, uh, having much more lust, or more like are much more sexually active than someone who would be like a refined woman, and this romance versus kind of physical attraction and lust. So you see this dichotomy here too that you're mentioning.
And I was just thinking of your earlier point when you just quickly said, I think it was in the start of the conversation, that you found this film to be a bit Kafkaesque. But I kind of start to think how it is like Franz Kafka's The Trial, in a way that Franz is kind of like Kay from that book, or also that Orson Welles film, where everything is going against him. Because we see the character Kay, again, the people are after him, even though he doesn't know why they are after him.
Yeah.
Everything is just crashing down in his world. So it's kind of similar, like with Franz Biberkov here, how he's exploited by these posh gay guys, but also his kind of old friends kind of turn against him when they constantly make fun of him, and his relationship with Eugen and even his sister can be a bit over the top and also quite hostile to Franz.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about Hedwig yet. Yeah, what an interesting character. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, she makes that big scene in the kind of in the apartment when they have that party, and yeah,
She's like, you guys can't smell it, but I can. It stinks to high heaven. Yeah, because it's like it's kind of a puzzle, right? Same as the trial. It's like a puzzle. It's like he's there, he's got the money. So what's preventing him from entering? what is the root cause? Like what is the reason? Why can't he? Why can't he? Is it he can't learn? So what is it about the learning aspect that he just can't get right? What is it about the relationship aspect that he doesn't quite get right? What is it about the investment aspect that he doesn't quite get right? Like it's like that. It's this puzzle, and it just never gets solved. It just ends up in utter exhaustion, where you're just frustrated no matter what you try to figure these things, and you're frustrated in every one of your attempts. And there's no savior. I think that part makes it very cynical, because there is a part that you almost feel like, oh, someone from his past, the friend he hoped, his real friends who aren't his class friends and not friends with him because of his money or what he can offer, one of them's going to come to save him. And then here's the big spoiler. So again, if anyone's still listening, maybe skip this second, but even he's not able to save him. He arrives too late. So that's something interesting too as a choice, in terms of the plot.
Yeah, we see kind of how all these people live inside like these very rigid bubbles. But then there are these kind of scenes that kind of try to break the bubble, like the sister when she verbally attacks all the people in that party.
Mm-hmm.
And also, well, for Franz, the bubble breaking happens all the time when they make fun of him. But I also started to think about a couple of funny scenes again, like when they are again buying the trip to Morocco in that travel agency, like when Franz says that, "Do you know how to speak Moroccan?" And then Eugen says, "No, they speak French." Yeah, and all
Yeah,
those, like, there's so many kind of
yeah,
funny moments like that. And I was thinking of something else, but can't remember it anymore. But
yeah. It is funny, and that it's like Fox. While he's naive, he does take his shots, right? I think in that point he does say this. Well, now you can finally use your French or something like that. Like I think he does make these like snide remarks sometimes at Eugen, so it's not like always the one way humiliation. He does have his ways that he does sometimes, make these little comments. So there's like that's also kind of interesting. But yeah,
yeah,
yes, they speak French.
the first time he goes to Eugen's apartment and he says that, "Oh, your father is very attractive too," and then
Yeah,
he
yeah,
jumps to his bed with his shoes on, and then he
yeah,
goes to hide in the toilet when Eugen's ex-boyfriend comes, and then he comes from the toilet and and kind of embarrasses Eugen, and in a way. Yeah, but most of that stuff kind of happens very early on. Then the relationship kind of develops into the way that Eugen is the sole exploiter more, but in the beginning, kind of Franz gets to hit back quite a bit.
yeah. Mhm. That's very interesting too. Because when you mentioned that apartment, when he first goes to Eugen's apartment, he's very confident of his virility. But it's like by the Morocco trip, there's that point. He's like, I'm not even interested in sleeping with this guy anymore.
Yeah,
So is that kind of him being rendered impotent in a certain way? This world is slowly deteriorating him, all this virility and strength he felt, and then the bar scene after with those American soldiers and stuff like that. Right after that dinner, is that a kind of blatant way for him to recover that, because he's been so humiliated by the mother at that dinner? Because that's like right after, right? And he's just trying to hold on to these symbols, that the car, and then he's like, okay, these US servicemen, and trying to yeah.
yeah, but I guess in a way he becomes a bit more conscious as the movie goes on, because with the American soldiers they call him a bastard, and then he says something that, "Oh, bastard, how can they see it from my face?" or something. He says something like that. So he kind of becomes conscious of how people see him more towards the end, and then obviously his downfall starts. He gets those pains, kind of due to that exploitation. Kind of, again, it's all mental, but it becomes physical, I think. And obviously the ending, we haven't gotten to the ending, Yeah, but it's again like we've talked about, the tone of the movie is sometimes funny, sometimes bleak, but the ending is quite bleak when he's just in the train station laying there, and even Klaus and Max come there, and they just, I'm not gonna deal with this stuff. He's dead, whatever. And then the two kids steal his stuff from his
Yeah.
pockets, and then they talk about Helsinki, Finland, and all they are drunk in Finland. It's actually
Yeah, right. At the end, yeah.
it's actually funny how they reference Finland in few
Yeah.
different Fassbinder films. Like there's one film where these working class characters are taking a trip to Finland, but they don't really want to go and stuff. So I think maybe Fassbinder probably visited Finland a couple of times and then had these big opinions about it because he references it a few times.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, yeah, Finland, which I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like this utter humiliation, right? At the end, it's like that's why it's like funny, but it's also tragic, right? It's a very tragic what's happened, but there's something, yeah, humorous in the sense that yeah, he's kind of also like this, like you would say sad clown, no, or like Tears of a Clown character. Like he's kind of there, and he's always making jokes, and he's always kind of self-assured, and he's kind of just moving at the punches, and then just the end is just this utter humiliation that even in his death, it's humiliation. There's grave robbery, right? That's what the kids are doing. They're coming in, whatever you got left, we're taking it. The so-called supposed friend that you helped doesn't even want to get involved. It just wants to leave you there. It doesn't care to at least even give you a good send off or some kind of proper burial. Nothing. It's like I'm not getting involved in this. Like, and so and that's the thing, because in some ways, if you wanted to make it romantic, the true friend that you lent money to, that would be really taking a side, right? He would say, these friends you had earlier, they're real friends. And then these people in these class, they're exploitative. But in this sense, you're like, even your real friends, they are they your real friends? You know, if you're not in a particular person, maybe they won't even kind of come to help you. But it's such a journey to like actually go on. Now I feel like almost like watching it again, because I think about the whole loop and then where it started with that friend. It starts with that friend, or that his lover in a sense, and then ends with him, because it's like it starts with the carnival, with their act, and then he goes away, and then he comes back at the end, full circle. And where is Fox? It's like his fortunes went up, they went down. um, so what was this journey really about?
Yeah,
Really
again,
interesting.
that beginning is very interesting because they are acting, because this film is kind of, again, then taking different roles, but they can never become that role. In the
That's
end, they
interesting.
try to act, but they try to change, but you cannot kind of escape how you are as a person. It's kind of, this shows the inescapability of life, that you are who you are and you cannot change, which isn't actually always true, but this kind of takes that point of view. But it's kind of very much a tragic comedy in that way, that your life is what it is, and it's not gonna change that much even if you become an actor and even if you win the lottery. It's always gonna be awful in the end. But one of the funny scenes actually that I was thinking about earlier is that when they sign the contract and Francis just looking at the contract, oh yeah, it's right, yeah, I'm gonna get a part of the company. Oh yeah, did you write it there? Yeah, it's the paragraph 19. You can read it here, but then he just doesn't really read it. That's kind of funny how ignorant he is about absolutely everything.
Yeah, except he's aware of like one thing, which was very clever, where he's like, well, this must be in the contract that basically when the loan is paid off, I have the right to become like a partner in the, or if it's not paid off, I get to be a partner in the organization, which is like very interesting. It seemed like, okay, he does know something,
Yeah, but he
but
still
then they
gets
of
screwed.
course start, yeah, they still circumvent it. So it's almost like no matter how clever you are, they're more clever. right?
Yeah.
Because they'll just, you think you're getting somewhere, but you're not getting anywhere. Again, back to this kind of Kafkaesque thing. It's like you're getting somewhere, but you're not getting anywhere. You think you're getting somewhere. And with every proceeding, you think, okay, I'm finally gonna know what's actually going on. But it's not. There's this whole system, and then you're never gonna get a clear answer anywhere. And you're never gonna be able to figure it out. It's a maze. You're lost. And it's like, so there's the whole question: was Fox just better off never winning the lottery?
Well, he was, I think, yeah. Because then he got to be himself and have some kind of authenticity
Yeah.
in his life. He didn't have to be actor. I mean, he could be an actor in the carnival, but he didn't have to be an actor on his like other parts of his life.
Yeah.
But it's funny in the end again that he had worked for his own money, kind of, because they screwed him in the end that we are gonna get you back the money, but you worked for it. Like it kind of also shows how the workers never get anything. Yeah, they just screw you up.
Yeah.
But it's just somehow like this film really makes me laugh at the same time.
Yeah.
Even though it's so horrible, like we've talked about. Yeah.
I mean, that mud bath part, like, it made me laugh at so many points. But I just, you know, the mud bath, he comes in and he's just sitting there in the mud bath, and this mud bath is not even looking appealing, right? You're like, and then he's just synced in, and he's just so confident, right? Like, you know, I know what's going on. I'm running the show here. This whole thing, in a way, you can laugh at Fox too, in some the way, right? You feel for him, but you also laugh how he's just walking around with the swagger, like, I know what's going on, and we love each other. You know, it's all fine, and it's like, no, it's not, and there's just all this humor, and even we didn't even get to talk about the Max character, who was also super interesting, right? He's just this guy in the background, um, this slickster, right, selling them antique furniture and all this stuff, and he's like, things of value have to cost, and all this when he's selling them the furniture. And then they had the one piece of furniture was that ridiculous tete-a-tete. You know, the tete-a-tete, but it was like tete-a-tete-a-tete. So it's like three people, that piece of furniture, so they can all be head-to-head and have these like secret, like essentially have a discussion. And he sells them that, this monstrosity where the three chairs are. So it's like, I think I don't know if that was, I know tete-a-tetes are real, but that tete-a-tete-a-tete, I don't know, was something like he was trying to be funny and say it's like this three-way thing. So many things that could be explored.
And the mud scene when Francis thinking, yeah, I'm 71 kilos, I'm 176 centimeters, and I noticed, even I'm
The
enlightened enough
BMI.
to notice.
Yeah. BMI. I'm not my perfect weight. He's like, oh, you're a bit heavy. No, I'm at my perfect weight. I know, blah, blah. It's like his BMI calculation. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
That was really funny. Oh my god. Yeah.
And
Great
it's fun
film.
how, yeah, and again, we can end in a bit and go into other side of hope, but again, the Max character, it's interesting how he kind of is so interested in these working class people, because he's the first one who gets interested in France, and then in the end he's with Klaus as well.
Yeah.
He
And
doesn't
he's
want
just
to be with
kind of there, and you're like, is he having relationships with them, or he's just bringing them? Yeah, it's like Max is this shadowy character. He's kind of operating in the background, and what exactly is he doing? What are his interests? He's like a pure prophet. He's a pure opportunist, I would say.
I mean, he's kind of like the middleman that he
Yeah.
brings all the working class studs into their lives.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the
But
boyfriend, Philip, yeah. But yeah, I think that was, I mean, of course, we could discuss even more and more Hedwig and Philip and all these, but I think this gives us such a good feel for the film. It's been a nice discussion to have after seeing it.
yeah, and hopefully, people, you can also leave your comments about this film. We would love to read them. I mean, I know Peaches is gonna comment. He has seen this film. He's a big Fassbinder fan, and obviously Hegel reading intellectual, so I'm sure that he will bring us lots of interesting comments, whether you bring Hegelian aesthetics into it or not.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what he also says about the film and his comments. And yeah, even since we're talking about aesthetics, we're talking about so many different things in terms of like
Yeah.
Greek and Roman tragedy, classicism, and all that. So he's so like well versed in all that. So he's going to add like so much flavor to the discussion.
Yeah.
And
But
knowledge.
Yeah. But anyway, that was our discussion of the Fox and his friends. I'm really glad that Altaz ended up loving it too, and I got lots out of our discussion about this film. And again, I really enjoyed watching it again yesterday morning. It was my third time watching it, and there will be many more viewings in the future. And as people probably know, if you watch my channel, Fassbinder is my second favorite director of all time after David Lynch, and I think that if we continue this As Recommend series, there might be more Fassbinder discussions in the future, and I know Altaz has all the box sets and stuff, so there are more things to discuss. And by the way, I just realized that from my background, I forgot to have QRL as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I also
I was surprised to see that it's on the Criterion channel. I didn't know Corel is actually on the Criterion channel as well to watch.
yeah,
And
Criterion has
what
released it, but I guess it's on the channels. Maybe they will release it soon.
and then you also recommended one of his, right? What is it? The Night of 13 Moons, or I forget how the title goes.
Yeah, in a year with 13 moons.
Oh, yeah, in a year with 13 moons. Yeah, you
Yeah.
recommended that one as well. And what do you have back there? That's 24 hours doesn't make a day. Is that the one?
8 hours don't make a day.
Oh, 8 hours. Sorry, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I messed up the title. Yeah. He has so many films. I have the Berlin Alexanderplatz too that I need to go through. I read the book and then I thought I would go through the film, the TV series, and I still
Yeah,
haven't
it's
had a chance to do that.
insanely good. Yeah, it's insanely good. Yeah, I think that's kind of like the best one, but Fox and His Friends is my favorite one. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to have more Fassbinder discussions. It'll also get me to go through all those films that I have sitting on the shelf.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it for the first discussion. So now we are going to talk about Aki Kaurismäki's The Other Side of Hope from 2017. It's a film I've been a fan of pretty much since it came out. I've watched it 4 times now, and I think it shows many of the kind of classic Kaurismäki trademarks that we love him for. And this kind of like Fox and His Friends is tonally kind of all over the place, but in a good way. So it's at times very dark, but at other times it's funny, and then at other times it's quite hopeful. But just like last time, I'll let you say some general thoughts about it, and how did you feel about the film? Did you like it? And
Absolutely. So this is my third Kaurismäki film, and yeah, I've been just following your recommendations of his films, and thanks to you, I got this lovely box set that I believe you have as well.
I don't
From
have it actually.
course. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for recommending it. And here they had it, of course, on sale like end of last year. So I managed to pick it up then, and then since then I followed some of your recommendations. You suggested the Match Factory Girl and Ariel, and then now this one, The Other Side of Hope. So you're right that you can see many of the trademarks, and what an interesting filmmaker he is, and his unique blend of, again, humor, tragedy, approaching like interesting and subject matters that are important, empathy, and any number of things. So yeah, my overall kind of for the film was just, I love this film as well. I just really enjoyed it. It's just it's very entertaining. It's very interesting, and once again, a very accessible film. So anyone who's thinking this is art house cinema, no, it's very much like film you can enjoy and get into and relate to and connect with and laugh with. So it's a fantastic film.
So where to start with this film? I mean, it was very kind of relevant in terms of the subject matter when it came out, as it was kind of 2 years after the migration crisis in 2015 in Europe. And so the migration was constantly talked about in Europe. I mean, it still is and still very relevant with the rise of far-right parties, but also many people who aren't far-right and people who fight against the far-right. So there's these constant tensions about this issue in Europe and obviously in the US and other places in the world too. So it's a very political film, and you can see it immediately when you start watching it. We see the Finnish police, for example, how they deal with immigrants. We see the migration centers. We see these kind of neo-Nazi racists, which kind of brings the more darker side to this film when we see these violent people trying to go after our main character Hachi. Sometimes Hachi manages to escape, but sometimes he also gets beaten up. But with all that said, there is this kind of sense of hope as we see him kind of connecting with these Finnish people in this restaurant, and that's kind of funny at many points. So we see that there is this possibility for human connection with people from different backgrounds, but we also see the dark side of society when there are so many of these people who cannot accept people that are different to them, who are hateful, who are violent, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Definitely very relevant topic. And last year I watched Ken Loach's film, The Old Oak. And I think in that you mentioned Kaurismäki in one of the comments as well. So you can see that because it's dealing with similar themes of the whole people coming in through asylum and settling in, and then local communities or individuals' response. But I think from like an overarching connection, because I started to think about, okay, why did SGS suggest these two together? So I mentioned that to my wife too. I'm like interested, why did he put these two together? So one, definitely what she mentioned is, yeah, it's like outsiders trying to break into a new world, trying to fit in. But as we were talking, based on what we just discussed about Fox and his friends, there's always also this element of naive hopefulness, right? So and it's interesting, right? Because Khaled kind of finds himself in Finland by accident, in a sense, right? We find out that he was like on the ship, and then the ship ends up coming to port in Finland, and then he gets off. He's not intentionally targeting the country, and I don't know if that's a particular point or not, but that's always a discussion in this, that it's like a preconceived target, that almost like this reason for seeking asylum or coming to this country or seeking immigration to a country, it's like pre-targeted. They know you got it good there, and then they're trying to come and take some of that themselves, and it's a way of escaping their own problems and having to deal with their country. So there's all this. I guess we can talk about Kaurismäki's like empathy for that situation through humor too, when he applies for asylum and they reject it, and they basically say there is no conflict ongoing in your country and you can return back without any safety to your. So really taking this very bureaucratic legal way of just denying every element, and we don't recognize there's a conflict, and so you can easily go back and you'll be perfectly safe there. And of course we know there's no way it's going to be safe back there.
And of course, it cuts to that scene where there is the news broadcast from the TV, and then they show the situation from Aleppo, Syria, and then the awful violence and explosions and stuff. So it's kind of, those political things are very in your face in the movie at moments. And I know you haven't seen the latest Kaurismäki film yet, Fallen Leaves, but it also kind of has commentary on the Ukrainian war, and it's quite in your face. So it's kind of does a bit of a similar thing with the other relevant current theme. Yeah. But yeah, you can really see the empathy. And I think, again, Kaurismäki has given lots of interviews on this, on like film festivals and stuff. And he is obviously someone who has lots of empathy for immigrants and also for other discriminated groups and poor people and stuff. And yeah, and he also tackled these topics in his film that was previous to this one called Le Havre. But I thought that Other Side of Hope did it better, and I like this film more, although I need to watch Le Havre again as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like there is a parallel between Fox and his friends in this film, because in the beginning it's that turn of luck aspect there too, where he decides to like Wickstrom. He's like, you can call me Wickstrom. It's like I apologize if my pronunciation's off, but yeah, he decides to basically sell his business and then just go and play poker. It's very similar to how Fox just goes and like, I'm gonna go play the lottery, and it works out. So there's this immense turn of hope, or like naive hope, or taking this risk and like trying your luck, and his luck just works out. But he seems to be very certain that his luck is gonna work out. Obviously, he's living a tragic situation, which we find out, why he leaves his original situation. Um, but all kind of humor does ensue after when he decides to purchase that restaurant. And there's a lot of social commentary beyond the whole immigration thing, because it's always also about how the average person is being treated. um, where the guy selling the restaurant just basically doesn't pay them the wages they're owed. And we hear he's just basically going to take off to some foreign location. He's just going to get the heck out of Finland with the money, probably to save taxes or something like that, because he's taking everything in cash.
And it's funny how Wikström talks about the authorities, because he says that I'm the friend of authorities, and when the people the authorities come to check his restaurants, and he's like on his best behavior, but then at the same time he's hiding this again immigrant. So he's kind of, there's this interesting kind of battle there, that he quote unquote loves the authorities, but then he hides an immigrant and kind of fights against the authorities in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the immigrant and the dog. So I thought that's kind of funny. He's being funny too. He's like taking in all kinds of strays. So the immigrant stray, and then later on there's that little doggy. Koistinen, is that how you pronounce it? That little dog. Like, who's that? Koistinen.
Yeah.
Who's that? This is a dog. Koistinen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's funny
go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny when Khaled and Wikström talk for the first time outside the restaurant next to the garbage, and then they punch each other, and yeah, but I'm bigger. Yeah, he says that. Yeah, he's kind of like almost like Tony Soprano-esque figure, and he just punches him down, and it's really funny. But then they become friends after that. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, and like this doesn't have to do a plot, but like you said, you can see all his the Kaurismäki's like trademarks. And one thing is how he physically chooses his actors. Like he really uses the physicality of the actors to make a point too. There's another layer of storytelling for him that's very much tied to like silent films like Chaplin and stuff. The physical aspect of the actor and how they're moving physically has everything to do with the aesthetic of the film, right? So even Wikström is so interesting in how he moves. Like there are all these periods of silence, right? There's no dialogue, and you're just watching the actor go through certain actions, entering certain scenes. And I really like enjoyed that in the Match Factory Girl, Ariel, this film. Like you can see that how he chooses actors based on the physicality, and it's just so interesting for the audience just to see them move through space in his aesthetic, in his world, in the world he creates. Even Khalid, the stature, like you're saying, like when you even see the actors besides themselves, some will be tall and slim next to someone who's like Tony Soprano-esque, versus okay, the immigrant, but he's kind of like short and like very, very interesting in how he does that. Absolutely love that.
And you can see a bit of that in with the far right Nazis as well, because they are these kind of big big guys as well, and you
Yeah,
can see.
yeah,
And then when the kind of homeless people come to help Khaled to fight the Nazis off, and they
yeah.
are all like they have kind of injuries and disabilities and stuff, so you can see how they are kind of the oppressed and the poor, and then the Nazis are like this. Like there's this kind of a interesting distinction there and
Mhm.
physicality in there.
And that's a very touching scene too, right?
Yeah,
Because apparently they always make it like, oh, those are the people who are against immigration, with the fact that they're coming because they know what's right and wrong, or they're just seeing the human being. They're like, you're not going to come and commit this act. It's like, yeah, that's the hope aspect when you see that kind of behavior, like people you wouldn't expect, or people who are marginalized themselves, and they jump to protect him, which in some ways, yeah, makes this different in tone to Fox and His Friends. Fox and His Friends is like much more cynical. It's like the marginalized people are not necessarily more aware, but there is a propriety in some of the characters. You've got the people who aren't, but then there are the people who do value. Even Vikstrom, okay, he's a restaurant owner, but he's fair, because when they try to claim their unpaid wages, he pays one and says, "Don't tell the other," and the information gets passed on. So that's a really touching scene when they come to save him.
and there's this kind of clash of cultures, both in terms of like different domestic cultures clashing, but also the foreign culture, or the culture from the immigrants clashing with the Finnish culture. And then there's my favorite part of the movie, when they turn the restaurant into a
I
Japanese
knew it.
restaurant.
I
Yeah,
knew you would say that. Yeah.
yeah, because it's so funny when they have to get the
Oh man.
herring, and that the herring is like a pretty traditional food here in Sweden, but it's so disgusting. Yeah,
I loved how they're making the sushi piece. This much wasabi on top.
yeah, so that
We
it hides the
we
soul.
gotta do something trendy. What's trendy? Sushi. And the sushi they're making, and then when all the Japanese come in, and then you're like, oh man, they're gonna hate the sushi. And of course, they're showing that part of culture, because Japanese are not necessarily gonna come and tell you this is terrible, but it's just, again, physically you can just see their the sushi is something they really did not enjoy, and may have made them physically sick as they're walking out of the restaurant. Oh man, so funny, so funny.
Oh, and even earlier when they get the first customer after Wikström has bought it, and they put the herring in or it's not herring, but it's, I don't know what it's in English, but it's called silakka in Finnish, and they from that
Sardine.
kind of, yeah, from that kind of rustic metal box,
Yeah,
and
you
it's
just
so
serve the can with the boiled potato. Yeah, that part is so funny. It's
yeah,
like you're going all the way to the restaurant to eat something you could easily eat at home. It's like mainly like you're just there to have your beer, because it's
yeah,
like you just open a can of sardines with some boiled potato. That's so great. And I think so. I mean, of course, I want to hear your opinion, because I was watching that and I was like, there's humor there too. Because what I found interesting is it's not like the whole focus is on this whole immigration story. There's this life in Finland, daily life in Finland thing that he does. So you see these elements of daily life, okay, where you drink, what you eat, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering, do you think he's also going and saying, as we're going about here in our day, and a lot of it, to be honest, may seem boring or not that great, there's someone out there for whom the situation's so bad that for them this is a fantastic place to live. So that shift of perspective, like, here you are, you have your daily struggles, but for these immigrants coming in, this is like heaven. And there's a kind of humor to that too, that how is this heavenly kind of thing, because when you live somewhere, you're so your day to day.
yeah. But the Kaurismäki is kind of how he shows Finnish culture. It's always kind of very over the top and obviously kind of rustic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It shows everything, which it isn't obviously. Life in Helsinki, where the characters are, it's very modern,
yeah.
and technology is very developed and stuff. So it's not really like that. Like he shows in his
Yeah.
movies, it's not that rustic. But yeah, I guess that was a good point that compared to obviously when you come from a war zone, then pickled herring might be a treat for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. It's just a thought. What I thought, as watching, and you're right. Obviously, it's clear that he is, he's creating this rustic aesthetic. It's like, what you would say, like Wes Anderson. There's a world he creates. Clearly, that's not Finnish, or that's not really Finland, but it's like, in a way, he's being funny about Finland. At least that's what I gather. Obviously, I'm not experienced. I haven't been to Finland and all that stuff. So I'm like, he's being very funny, right? It's like when I don't know if you ever seen this Canadian show like Corner Gas, and they're like living in, I think it's Saskatchewan and all this, and it's the way they're showing this quaintness, this rusticness. These people living in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of hilarious, right? Because if you go to Toronto, or if you go to Vancouver, or if you go to Edmonton, or if you go to Calgary, that's still not Canada, right? It's a kind of quaint rusticness, but at the same time, as a Canadian, somehow you still associate with that. And you think it's funny, of like a way of making fun of yourself, even though it's a very exaggerated, um, location-specific kind of aesthetic. So I thought that's like so interesting.
Yeah, and you can see like kind of quote unquote true Finnishness in Kaurismäki's films, but it's just in a very over the top way because Finnish people do kind of talk in a weird way and we don't talk that much so often. So that's kind of similar how it is in
Okay.
Kaurismäki films in a way, but obviously the Kaurismäki way is way more just over the top version of it.
Okay, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. So
And I
you
mean,
can see that, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. And of course, there are these type of restaurants. I mean, they aren't that awful, but these type of like lower quality pub type of restaurants. I mean, you have those in the UK too, that where you can get like cheap, trashy, kind of homemade type of food. But yeah, I don't think they would give you like herring or sardines like that. Even though it's a traditional food here, but I think it would look a bit better in a restaurant. But
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting that you mentioned. Okay, you don't talk that much, but he clearly pushes that to the extreme, right? Where in his films, they're like a long period of time, no one is talking. Like everyone is just, even in the Match Factory Girl, where she goes and she's like sits down with her cake and she's just eating her cake in like absolute silence, and there's like no interaction. There's no discussion. But yeah, he's clearly pushing that aesthetic. But I just see so much. There's so much humor in that silence, and I'm like, it's so interesting how he, without dialogue, he doesn't rely a lot on dialogue. He relies a lot on like blocking, where the characters are they're walking, their interaction, their mannerisms, the way they look at each other, and then it's of course deadpan, which is also hilarious. Again, I'm not super familiar with like Finnish culture, but that stoicism is definitely a part of seen as the Scandinavian aesthetic in some ways. And but yeah, the way they will just kind of look at each other for like long periods of time, just studying one another. It's so funny, right?
But silence is big part of Finnish culture that we know how to be silent, that we don't have to fill every single moment with
Yeah,
talk.
that's right.
We are completely fine with sitting around with your friends and being in silence for a little while. But we aren't like the Americans that it needs to be like constant. How are you? How is your weekend? We don't really like that kind of small talk. We often say that we kind of say things when we have something to say, but we don't just talk for the sake of talking. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what makes watching his films so refreshing too, because yeah, it's not always about dialogue like another favorite filmmaker of yours, like Ozu. Like it's like you dial down the dialogue, that doesn't make a boring film, actually. In fact, it can make it a very immersive, interesting film as well. So I really do appreciate that. And then for people who are, troubled by reading too many subtitles, films like that are great films to like watch as a first or early subtitle films, because you don't have to read that many subtitles. It's more about uh, observing and immersing yourself. And obviously, we were talking, or I mentioned it, the music, the accordion music of Fox and his friends. So once again, Karos Maki, I love the use of music, and how he puts in like almost like mini music videos, like especially in this film. And there are these music sequences or songs are and the choice of the music. I absolutely love the music, the songs in the film. They're just so great.
Yeah, they really fit the aesthetic in general. Again, the music is something that I mean I wouldn't listen to that type of music on its own, but it fits really well to the films. And of course, there's this constant aesthetic throughout Kaurismäki's career with this type of like rock and roll music and stuff like that. Yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah,
there's like a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like you said, that this movie in particular has so many of those scenes. Like there's the one scene in the train station when Khaled is asking for that I need to find the shower, and then
Yeah,
later on when the Nazis are there, they come from his back. He's listening to that song and he's liking it. And then when Khaled and his friend from the migration center go to the restaurant, there's this song, and then there's this kind of connection between the cultures. And yeah, there's lots of importance in music here in this film.
yeah, and then when they go to the bar, before they go to the bar, let's go drink what the non-believers drink here.
Yeah,
That was so really funny. But what I found really touching is the dynamic between Khalid and Mazdak. So again, like you can see the other side of hope, and in a way, it's different than Fox and his friends. You have like great friendships. So here's a friendship. One's from Iraq, one's from Syria. Technically, you wouldn't have that kind of affinity in where they're coming from, but in this world, they're very much there to help one another, support one another, exchange information. So that shows Karasmaki's the whole idea of hope, like through this kind of friendship and connection, that there is a decency that Wickstrom is, even he's an owner, and even though he's illegally employing um, an immigrant, but and hiding it from authorities, and maybe he, I don't know, gets to pay a lower salary to that person. At the same time, he's helping. So there is this not as you know, not an exploitative world in a sense. There are decent people around. Quirky decent people, funny decent people, but decent nonetheless. And I like that. It's like not over the top sentimentality, right? It's like they're very interesting. Sentimentality mixed with this stoic aesthetic, but nonetheless it's there, and it almost feels real, even though it's a surreal world in some ways. But it feels very real because you're like, yeah, you don't. There are these friendships or people help you, but it's not this very sentimental, over the top way. They help you, and it means something to you, and so there's this warmth in what appears to be a very stoic aesthetic. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
yeah. And we could add to that kind of hopefulness the relationship between Wikström and his wife. Obviously, in the beginning, he leaves her and he puts the ring to the table, and it's kind of funny in a dark way. And then the wife just puts the ring to the along with the cigarettes and stuff. But then near the end, Wikström goes back to his wife, and has this kind of hot dog stand, and then he says that I don't want anything, but can I take you home? And it's kind of beautifully hopeful in that way, and maybe they got back together in the end. And also the other moment of hopefulness is when obviously Khaled gets stabbed near the end, which is really dark and awful, but then he has a smile when he's next to that tree
Yeah.
after he had kind of gotten his sister to the police station, and he's hopeful that his sister will have a better life, but then he's just smiling even though he's maybe dying and looking into the sunset, basically. Yeah. So there's lots of hope even in those dark times.
And I can see everything you're saying about the political, because he is breaking certain stereotypes. One with the whole funny bar scene, the stereotype of extremism, because obviously what everyone really thinks about when they think about the Muslim world is they're like, oh, they don't drink, or they treat their women in a certain way. So showing a very warm brother and sister relationship, where the brother is invested in a better future for his sister and stuff like that, and very much cares about her as a person. He's subverting all those things that, okay, these stereotypes, by showing these relationships, I'm taking away from these stereotypes that everyone is just kind of interested here to just kind of push this like fundamental Islam, and then basically turn Finland into a fundamental Islamic kind of state or something like that. And he's by focusing on human beings and a brother and sister relationship, friendships, or even them showing them drinking a beer. Like, it's not, um, these people aren't necessarily a threat. But also, I just love the opening when I just started laughing when he comes out. There's like the coal, and he comes out with his face is all black, and it's just the way he's looking. It's just, there's something so funny about. And then he's walking down the street, and he's like still got the coal, and then there's someone who's homeless, and he decides to give them money. I thought that was really, really funny,
Yeah.
and very, very subtle, very cheeky. Like, he's an illegal immigrant, but he's very conscious that, oh, this guy has it worse. He's on the street, and he decides to give him some money.
And one more stereotype that it kind of breaks is that in Finland, the far right always says that immigrants don't want to work. But then, of course, there's the scene when Wikström says, wanna work, Kale? And he says that, yes, I wanna work. And then he starts working. And so that's another kind of stereotype that it breaks.
Yeah.
And of course, that's how when you talked about how he has the coal in his face and stuff, like that's how he also kind of meets Wikström for the first time, when Wikström is coming with the car, and they kind of briefly meet each other in the street, but then they still don't know who each other are yet. And then their kind of first proper interaction is the fight that they have, which is funny.
Yeah, I really like the locations he chooses. With this one, with the port and the ships. Obviously, it has to do with the story and the plot, but I just really like the location choices, and the way artistically they're photographed and all that. It has a surreal quality. It makes it so interesting. Like, that makes the whole aesthetic really, really interesting. It almost feels like some other place. I just in all his films, I noticed that I just really like his location choices, the way he chooses to shoot things, the actors' physical performances, the humor. I love the humor. I love how it can be like everything at once. It can be tragic, it can be sad, it can be difficult, like you said, and even dark, like him getting stabbed. But then there's kind of this element of humor. So there's melancholy, but there's also joy all at the same time. I find that really powerful in his films, that there are all these elements all at once in the experience of life at
And
any given time.
I think the critic Mark Kermode, in his kind of brief review of this film in YouTube that you can find, compared the aesthetic even to David Lynch's Blue Velvet. Like the restaurant that you have that color in the walls and stuff, that's kind of fairly Lynchian. Obviously, if you look at the whole film, it doesn't like look Lynchian, but the restaurants, some of the scenes there are a bit like Lynchian, so that's very interesting. But I think the aesthetic in general, I think Kaurismäki has definitely learned a lot from Fassbinder in terms of the color and the angles, and he obviously loves French cinema also, so there's a bit of kind of that Bresson minimalism, and Ozu is his favorite
Mm.
director, and Ozu is the reason he started making films. So obviously there's a bit of that, and how his films often end with like boats going into the sea or things like this. So it's a bit like Ozu films. You have the trains moving. So there's
Yeah, yeah.
lot you can see those influences, and even that kind of attention to detail when Ozu films like a kettle or something. And I mean, Kaurismäki has talked about the red kettle in Ozu films, how he shoots these kind of kitchen things and these small things, and you can see that in Kaurismäki too.
Yeah, and there's because even in Ozu, right? Of course, it's tied to Japanese culture, and in Ozu, in a sense, that's really interesting what you're sharing. Because yeah, you could say Ozu also in his way, he's taking elements of Japanese culture and then he's exaggerating it, right? So in terms of the social conventions, acting properly, um, in some ways we're saying stoically, but obviously the character is feeling much more behind that stoic front than what we are being allowed to see. So the audience, in a sense, gets a sense that, of course, there's something deeper going on there. There's a pain, there's a confusion, there's a conflict, there's whatever. But this is the front aesthetic. But then there's more going on, and you see the exact same thing in Karasmaki, like this kind of dialed up. I'm going to take elements of the culture and really focus on those. And I know you said that it's kind of making fun of Finnish culture, but in all his films, you do get this feeling that like you said, like even with Lynch, like Twin Peaks, like there's a quaintness. You want to go there. You wish you could actually enter that world. These, there are these threats, there are these things, but they're nice people. You would actually like to meet those people. You would actually, even if you're being served a can of sardines with potatoes, but you would like to experience that. Like there's something about it that's very inviting to and welcoming in some ways for the audience, and very curious, and you actually want to stay with the film. You make shorter films, but you kind of want to stay in that world longer, even though the film's ended. I feel that way with Ozu too. That it's a really like touching world, like in a way when you enter into Ozu film.
Yeah, they are both kind of comfort directors to me, so I can totally get that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking this funny anecdote. I remember this Kaurismäki interview, or it might have been an interview with one of his regular actors, but they talked about their trip to Japan, and apparently Kaurismäki had forced them to eat sushi every day. That the only thing that they offered was sushi, because Kaurismäki loves sushi so much. So he kind of has a personal connection to that food in this film, as it is his kind of like favorite food, because he loves that, and he loves Japan so much. He's a big fan of Kurosawa and Misoguchi as well. I know that.
Oh, I could see that. Yeah.
And I also was thinking, you mentioned Twin Peaks, that, I mean, you might not remember this because this is such a brief thing in this film, but there's the bar scene. But if you look at the bartender, he's this bald guy, very tall guy, and he looks
Yeah.
exactly like that guy
Yeah.
in Twin
Yeah.
Peaks.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually think they like
Yeah.
look
I
like,
thought it was almost like, I was like, it can't be the same guy. Yeah. He
yeah,
did
they
look
look like
exactly.
doppelgangers. I've
Yeah. Yeah.
always noticed that. It's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
creepy in a way that one is a Finnish guy, other is an American guy, but they look like exactly the same.
Yeah. And it's that introduces, like Lynch, like the surreal in the daily, like where everything seems like kind of daily and mundane, but by using physically these interesting figures, there's an element of the surreal. Like this extremely tall bartender, in some ways, gives you a, like you said, like this jolt, like something doesn't fit or something is out of the ordinary, something somewhat surreal, because just it's not every day you're going to see a bartender that tall. So it's almost like there is a in the mundane. He's like, it's surreal. I really like that. It's like this almost like documentary feeling thing, but it's totally surreal. The way he shoots the cars, the car he chooses, how people sit in the cars, how people choose to behave. It's like there's a surrealness to it, which I love. And one interesting thing you're saying about Ozu, and then I was thinking about the sushi, and I was like, I wonder if that sushi they're making is kind of him making fun of himself, like in a way it's like self-effacing, because he's inspired by Ozu, but his version of what he does is like almost like putting all this wasabi on because stylistically he's much more, colorful and all that stuff than we got, or something like, I'm not saying, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I'm like, wonder he's kind of making fun of himself, like he's making this Finnish version of Japanese classic kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see that because there is this kind of old interview clip on YouTube where young Kaurismäki is talking about Ozu, and he says something like that, I'm trying to make all these movies, but they will never be as good as your movies, or something like that. And yeah, but I'm going to try. I'm going to make this many movies. I'm going to try to make something as good as your films, but it's never going to work out. Yeah. But back to the bartender also. He actually kind of acts like a Lynchian character here. He has that kind of very slight smirk and kind of weird charm, and he looks kind of serious, but kind of not serious at the same time. And he talks in a very kind and polite way, but there's kind of slight weirdness there. So he feels like he could really be the guy from Twin Peaks. And this even came out in the same year as Twin Peaks, The Return, these films. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, even when you're what you say that Wickstrom, like Tony Sopranos, he sort of is, right? He's this imposing, right? But it's like all he just becomes like a restaurant owner. But yeah, there is that element. There's like, he's so big and he's so tough, but then, like you said, there is just a slight turn on the face where it's like, it's almost like he doesn't take himself as serious. He knows he's so serious looking, but he's not as takes himself as seriously as you would think. Yeah, there, and it's always kind of there, even in the Match Factory Girl, even with elements of revenge. It's like there's a humor somewhere, like someone is having a laugh. Even they're having a laugh. The actor somewhere inside, they're not like saying it's as serious as all of that. Um, really interesting aesthetic. Really interesting aesthetic. And very different from Fox and his Friends, I think, in that way. Fox and his Friends is, I think, cynical.
Yeah.
This is very, even though there's some dark things and dark elements and serious things we're talking about, ultimately, it's not. It's hopeful. It's in some. I wouldn't say idealistic, but it is somewhat romantic.
Yeah. And he kind of takes that to his latest film as well, which is about alcoholism. There's the Ukrainian war, but it's also about love and human connection. So when you get to see that, you can also draw some parallels between those films.
Yeah, I've been really trying to catch that because they still had a few remaining shows, but the timing didn't work out even in the cinema. So I'm seeing if it's still playing. But yeah,
But
it's yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I think the Blu-ray comes out in the UK next month in March.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I'll be watching home, definitely, but it would be nice to catch catch his film in the cinema as well.
Yeah.
But it's also, the dining and the way he kind of he does this minimalism thing. I think you mentioned it right earlier that he kind of does this. It reminds me of these paintings. I think it's American painter. Is it Hopper? Was a paint. Maybe I'm misquoting or misremembering the name, but the one where they're in the dining room. It's like people sitting it's a night scene, and there are people just sitting at this counter at this diner. It's a very famous painting, but his aesthetic reminds me of that. Very minimalist, very clean lines. Even the way he does his night shots. So I'll get the correct reference and then share it with you.
Yeah. And of course, everybody also talks about how kind of Jim Jarmusch and Kaurismäki are brothers from the another mother or whatever.
Yeah.
They make the same
Yeah.
movies. Whoever came up with it first, but I do personally prefer Kaurismäki. I think Kaurismäki is a bit more consistent, but I think Jarmusch, when he's on, he's really good. And in his film Night on Earth, there is this final segment, because it's divided into, I think, 5 vignettes, and the final vignette is actually in Helsinki, with Kaurismäki regular actors, and it feels like a Kaurismäki film. And
Really?
that's actually my favorite Jarmusch film, so I highly recommend that one. It's on Criterion.
So yeah, I haven't seen Night on Earth yet. I've seen Jarmusch. I've seen Down by Law,
Yeah.
and I've seen his more recent Patterson. So I can see that obviously the comparison, but I feel like what you're saying it gets pushed a bit too much, where you feel like they're making it's like they're making the same films, but they're not, because Jarmusch is different, right? In some things, you could see some of the kind of the way the situation is set up, some of the humor that's in them. So you can see similarities, but I see them as different, very different as well in aesthetic. But yeah, I'll definitely watch Night on Earth. It's one that I want to see um,
Yeah,
of his, and also Coffee and Cigarettes. Right? So that's him too.
yeah, that one I haven't. And then
And then
out of
Ed,
the
go ahead.
from that Kaurismäki set, Jarmusch's favorite Kaurismäki film is Take Care of Your Scarf, Tatiana.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's a good one as well. I think it's from the late 80s or early 90s, but it's really good.
Yeah. Is it in this set?
It should be.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, I see it from 1994. Oh, and I'll definitely watch it. I mean, I want to watch all of these.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they are all
I'll-
good. At least some of them less good than others, but all of them are good. So.
yeah, I definitely I want to go through this whole set because everything I've seen so far, I just love it. And it's like right, I just love this kind of aesthetic and style and
Yeah.
way of things. I find it just so interesting.
And we can maybe do more of them even in this podcast series. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I think for the next episode we are probably gonna choose some different directors, but we'll see how this will go in the end or in the future.
Yeah, I'm actually like really glad with this discussion because I was like wondering, yeah, what I would actually say, and then I was thinking, okay, what I'll do is I'll basically see what you say and think about it. But it's nice that we could actually engage because, of course, you have greater familiarity with these films. I'm just seeing them for the first time, so it was nice that there are so many things you could like dialogue about with these films.
And I'm good that this first episode seems to be a success in the way that you liked both of the films a lot. So it's great.
I loved both of the films.
Yeah.
I love them. Yeah. I think they're so great.
And I hope Peaches will like this film too when he watches it. I know he likes Kaurismäki films. He has seen some of them, but he hasn't seen this one yet.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to get his thoughts actually, even on the other side of hope, and what he thinks about some of the events going on and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
But do you have anything more to add about the film, or should we go to the kind of last segment of this podcast where we are going to brainstorm about the next films that we are going to talk about?
No, we can go forward. I mean, I'm sure if on watching again, there would be more to discuss. Even before we had our chat, I was just revisiting some like clips from the film because it's also on the Criterion channel, and I was laughing.
Yeah.
I was laughing seeing some of the elements, even when he buys the. I love that part where he buys the restaurant and stuff like that, and the guy just takes the money out of the till and runs. And so yeah, but maybe some other time. But yeah, we can brainstorm.
Yeah, so I kind of have a pile of Blu-rays here of some choices that we could.
Okay.
And obviously, I don't know with all of these whether you own them or have access to them yet. So that's obviously going to play a part on which films we are going to talk about. Obviously, I'm not going to force you to buy something just for this podcast, although of course you can if you want. But
Well, it'll be worthwhile even if I do. So
yeah,
there'll be something worthwhile
but
to add.
I was thinking we could talk about this one next time, The Departed.
Yeah, you want to discuss The Departed?
No. It's just a mandatory joke in every single podcast.
I wouldn't be too.
But I'll let
kinda
the
love- Go ahead.
viewers know that at some point we are going to talk about Sword of Doom with Harakiri, but Altaz is gonna see Harakiri in the cinemas in April. So around that time, we probably will do a double bill with this and Harakiri. So I'm
Yeah, I
really
think it's
looking forward to it.
actually March. It's going to be in March. The
Oh, okay, nice.
Harakiri. No, or is it early April? Oh no, it's early April. Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
So I don't know whether you own any of these, but do you own any of these Koreeda films, for example?
I don't have the family values set but I have the one in there. What is it? After the Storm.
Yeah.
And so the family values is one I've been trying to pick up for a while because I know you like recommended there are 3 films in there that I want to see.
What
But I
about
don't know
this? Is
about
the
this one.
other Koreeda set from PFI?
Oh, okay, of Flesh and Blood. But is it still in print?
I think it is, but I'm not sure.
I will look at it actually because I wouldn't mind picking it up.
Yeah, this has 4 really good films. No, well,
Yeah,
but
I
as
would
you
love to
don't have
discuss one.
this yet, yeah, but maybe not next time yet because you don't own them yet. But we can put them in some of these episodes.
Yeah, no, and I will look at those sets and actually let you know because obviously I do need to add those to the collection. So if I end up adding them, then we can actually discuss what Koreeda film. I'd love to discuss Koreeda film.
Yeah, and I was thinking of a French double bill. I think you have the comedies and proverbs.
Yes, I do have
Yeah,
that.
so I think we could do maybe Pauline at the beach.
Okay, I haven't seen that yet. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like one of Peach's favorites. So I'm trying to think a bit that he could join the discussion as well if he wants, whether it's in the comments or whatever. But yeah,
Yes,
it's
that would
this
be
film.
fantastic.
Yeah, Pauline at the beach.
Okay.
Yeah, Antarium, I have only seen this once, and it's kind of a near favorite at this point, but I think it might become a favorite after a rewatch for me too. So.
And maybe we go through this pile, and then maybe if anyone wants to comment, they can also comment as well if they feel like, okay, you guys should do these 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
But
And I was thinking we could double up that with another French film, which is one of my personal favorites. It's Godard's La Chinoise.
okay.
This is available on Arrow. This is usually fairly cheap if you don't have it already. So.
Okay. And I haven't seen any Godard yet because I feel intimidated by Godard.
Yeah, but this is one that I've watched a couple of times, and I mean it's very political, but it's not one of his most difficult films. So.
Okay, that would be cool. Yeah, French double bill.
Yeah. And this is like in my top 50 of all time as well. So yeah. And then
because you and Tony talk about Godard, I feel so
yeah.
intimidated. I'm like, Godard must be the illustrious.
Yeah, then I mean this would have been a great double bill with Koreeda, but it's Misoguchi's The Life of Oharu.
Ooh. I haven't seen that yet. I have it, but I haven't seen it yet. I've only seen Sancho, the bill of it. So.
But this is one of his kind of masterpieces. So. And with Misoguchi, there's obviously so many things to talk about. So I think it would be a great talk. Yeah. But I think this would be good with like one of the Koreeda films. Yeah. You could kind of double it up with like a older classic Japanese film with a modern Japanese film. So.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think part of that Japanese season, Ugetsu is there, I think, right? I think so.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Life of Oharu, yeah. I've been meaning to see that, so definitely could do that.
And then from this first Fassbinder set, he has one of my favorites, which is kind of a bit underrated one. It's this one, The Merchant of Four Seasons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy in the commentary for Fox and His Friends was like mentioning this one as there are some thematic, I think, parallels with Fox and His Friends. So I thought, yeah, I would love to see more Fassbinder. Who is this commentary by? Yeah, Hamish Ford. In case anyone's interested.
But those were some of my suggestions.
Oh, I mean, they're all great suggestions. So, what should we do?
Yeah. And obviously, I have so many other suggestions if I just open my favorites list. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Pauline at the Beach lesson that would be interesting. I am going to look at the Koreeda films because both those sets are like fantastic. So I do need to add them to the collection
Yeah.
anyways. So, and that with Life of Oharu could be very interesting as well. So
Yeah.
do we
Yeah.
go
I'm just
French
quickly.
or do we go Japanese? That's the
Yeah.
question.
I'm just quickly checking whether the Korea set is available. Um, I'm not sure actually is it available anymore.
Yeah, out of print probably. Because I
No,
never
no.
saw it in the BFI store, but you know that doesn't mean sometimes it is available from other sources, even though it's out of print. Yeah,
Well,
and
maybe
I was
not
very
that yet because we aren't sure whether it's available yet.
yeah, but I
Maybe
will definitely.
the French double bill would be cool
Yeah, I think so.
because you have the Rome films already, and then these you can probably get for like £10 or something. So
I think that's yeah. I think that's good. We can do that, and I can start watching some good Darn too.
yeah, and at least as far as I know, this should be still in print. So
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I think
and
he might even be on the Criterion channel, to be honest. But
yeah,
I want a copy, but I
yeah,
think it's
but
also
this is
good.
one that Criterion has never released at least. So.
Yeah, they never released it. Yeah, that's true.
But I remember there are some like really good special features here too that kind of help you with the politics, as it has some. Again, it's about these kind of student radicals in the 60s who are
Oh, okay.
obsessed about Mao and things like that. Obviously, in the 60s, there were these Maoist
Yeah,
movements in Europe and stuff. So, but it's also kind of very hysterical and fun because it kind of shows the students as very stupid and ignorant. So it doesn't like really show them, oh yeah, these people are right, but it kind of shows that, oh yeah, they don't really know what they're talking about.
Okay, no, I like stuff like that, so definitely.
And many
And
like famous actors here, like Jean-Pierre Lude and Anne Wiazemski and Juliette Berto, and yeah, and
I
that would
remember
be
you
like,
talking about the film. Yeah.
yeah, both of those films are around like 90 minutes long, so not too long.
No, definitely. Let's do that one then. Pauline at the Beach
Yeah,
and Chinoise next.
yeah, and Peaches loves both of the films, so we will get great comments from him, as both of them are his favorites too. So
Yeah, he can teach us something
yeah,
because he'll analyze it from like different layers than maybe I would look at it. Maybe you would be different, but yeah, he always looks at the films at such different layers. So it's always like you get some like really amazing comments.
and he's a big Rome expert, so I think especially for Pauline at the Beach, he will give us lots of great comments, and I believe he even rewatched it fairly recently, maybe last year, so it's probably quite fresh in his memory too. So
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I want to get through that comedies and proverbs set because so far I've only seen two films from that, and that's again on both of your guys' recommendations. So Full Moon in Paris, which was just
yeah,
was fantastic, and then I've just seen The Aviator's Wife
yeah,
so far, which is such an interesting film about stalking.
yeah.
It's
But
a great film.
Full Moon in Paris is something me and Tony have talked about privately as well. Again, it's big favorite for both of us, but yeah, Pauline at the Beach is really good. Yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. But it's like when you said that people are like, okay, Jarmusch and Karusmaki. That's like almost like if you said, oh, Romer and then Woody Allen, right? But it's like,
or
okay,
Linklater, Roman Linklater.
yeah, right. It's like, yes, some you would say similar interests, but you could hardly say they're the same. They're still kind of oriented differently. Um, so their cinema is very much their own as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the life of Oharu, I mean, there are so many double bills that you could do with that one. You could have it with like an Ozu film or a Kurosawa film. Mikio Naruse film. I mean, it would actually be a great double bill with Naruse's Floating Clouds, which should be in Criterion Channel. It's my favorite Naruse film. So.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch Naruse film. I haven't seen any yet. So definitely. So I think, yeah, maybe we do this one, Pauline and the Beach and La Chinoise, and then maybe, yeah, Life of Oharu and like Floating Clouds. And I think it'll be interesting too, because that Japanese film season will be going on as well. So I'll be very immersed in like some Japanese cinema. So maybe there'll be more interesting things to like discuss as a result.
Yeah. And this will give a good opportunity for me to rewatch some of these as well. As Pauline at the Beach, for example, I've only seen once. And like I said, I kind of have a strong feeling that it will become an all-time favorite.
Yeah.
After a rewatch, now that I've become such a Romeo fanboy.
Yeah.
As he's currently like ranked, I think 6th on my favorite directors list, which is really high. And he's just been skyrocketing into the past year or so.
Yeah.
And if you ever can get the new kind of Four Adventures of Rainet and Mirabelle release from the US, yeah, if you can ever get your hands to that, we could do that film at some point too. So. As Roger Kirby talked about it.
Yeah, right. That came out. What was it? It's a Kino release, right? Or no? What was that release? Is it Kino that put it out? It's like
I think last year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a great discussion he did too. Yeah, I'd love to talk about the film. That sounds so interesting.
Oh yeah, and forgot to pull this one up, but I think you already have bought this because of my recommendation, but the Nun.
Yes.
Yeah, this one I would love to talk about at some point. This is one that I have a lot to say about. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've been meaning to watch that. So you tell me. So if you want to discuss that one, like it'll give me a good opportunity to watch it. But yeah, I bought it on your recommendation. At the time when you talked about it. So.
To be honest, this would even make a good double bill with the Life of Oharu. So.
Yeah, it'd be kind of nice also to do that, like where you have like Japanese cinema and then you have French, because and then you kind of talk about themes, because that can be very interesting too, like cross culturally or across like different cinemas.
Yeah, but if we do this next time, and then we can see after that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Romeo and Godard. So.
There's another one I bought on your recommendation. But I don't have it here. Otherwise, I would have shown you. I was like, I even got this on your recommendation. But
so
I forget the English name for it.
What's the French name?
Maybe after we're done the chat, I'll grab it and then I'll show you.
Okay.
It's an Italian film, I think. Yeah. Because otherwise I'd have to like unhook, go grab it, bring it back, but maybe after the post chat.
Yeah, but anyway, we can wrap this chat up now. It was really fun, and I think I learned a lot about both of these films from this discussion, and I think this is really good practice for me also to kind of go more deeply into kind of single works of art and try to really analyze them and stuff. That kind of really does good for your brain, I think, because I don't get to do this type of stuff that often. Often in my channel, I do these kind of list videos and stuff where I kind of cram thoughts into few-minute segments and stuff. So it's kind of really fun to sometimes just go so deeply into single films, and it's good practice and very entertaining. Yeah.
And I really enjoyed this way as well, that it's a dialogue. Yeah. Because sometimes, if you make a video discussing a film, which is great, you get to get some thoughts out. But this is nice because it's dynamic, right? If you share something, you're kind of then commenting on that, and then you go down different paths than you would just discussing by yourself for a video. So it was really enjoyable. So I'm glad we started this series, and I'm looking forward to the other episodes and all the great films I'm going to get to watch as a result.
And again, shout out to Peaches as always. I mean, I think he knows how I feel because we talk regularly these days privately, but yeah, so I don't need to do anything specific because I give him constant shout outs anyway. But privately,
always shout outs to Tony.
Yeah. But yeah, please bring that Hegelian insight into this talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
fun.
would
Like,
love to hear what he's saying about that. Yeah, the aesthetic aspect, what he might say.
yeah, like recently he said that Hegel said X and Y, and also Nietzsche kind of said the same thing in the Bird of Tragedy. Like, it's really nice to have friends of this quality who can say that Hegel said this, Nietzsche said that. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Schopenhauer's aesthetics. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, anyway, thanks for coming on. I'm really excited for the future of this podcast, and I'm sure that we will also do other podcasts in the future with some topics, but I think this might be kind of a regular format that we will do from now on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and thank you for having me on and starting this. It'll be fantastic.
So thanks for watching. Let us know your comments, and sayonara and arigatou gozaimashita.